Alright guys, so it's that time of year again. Black Friday and Cyber Week are upon us. I know, it's crazy. This year just flew right by. But if you go and click the link down in the description, go over to YesWelder.com and you'll save 20% site-wide. 20% on everything. So click that link down below and get some YesWelder equipment.
Don't worry about that little guy.
Okay guys, so here we are again. We have yet another fine piece of equipment from YesWelder. And I'm way too short. Oh, there we go. We have another fine piece of equipment from YesWelder. This is a new release for them. This is the MIG205DS-B. Now, if you guys have watched any of my welding videos from the last, I don't know, probably close to a year now, I've been using the original MIG205DS, and it is a 205 amp machine. It does MIG, lift TIG, and stick, so it is technically a multi-process machine, but pretty much all of them are now. Well, they've just released this new MIG205DS-B, and we're going to go through it a little bit, but the cool part about this particular welder is that the new one is spool gun compatible, which means we can weld aluminum. And there's actually two different ways that we can weld aluminum, and we're going to do that today. So if you looked at the video description, it basically says, can we MIG weld aluminum? And with this particular welder, yep, we sure can. So gone are the days of having to buy extremely expensive TIG welders. You can now MIG weld aluminum, which you've always been able to MIG weld aluminum, but YesWelder has made it super easy, super affordable to be able to just, get by with welding aluminum. Now, you're not going to get the most beautiful welds if you're trying to weld tubing or pipe or intake tubing, intercooler tubing, turbo tubing, whatever you want to call it, charge pipes. But you are going to be able to stick two pieces of aluminum together with 100% argon and this particular welder. So I'm going to bring you guys in. We're going to go through some of the differences between the 205DS-B and the original 205, and then we can get into welding a little bit of aluminum and see how this thing does. Now, keep in mind, I am not a guy who welds aluminum with a MIG welder. I always use my TIG welder to weld aluminum because I'm usually doing things like motorcycle cases and aluminum repairs and aluminum piping for vehicles where you really want the aesthetic appearance of the weld to be just as good as the strength of the weld. Where MIG welding aluminum, you're not going to get the most pretty thing in the world, but the strength is going to be there. So it's great for doing things like truck beds, truck boxes, trailers, pretty much anything that's made out of aluminum. It's going to be great for doing stuff like that. It's going to be great in a pinch, but it's not the best thing to do if you're looking for an aesthetically pleasing weld. So let's come over to the welder. We'll show you a little bit about this guy, and then we'll get right into welding the aluminum, and I'll give you my process on how we test these things out too. All right, so I want to take you guys in on a little bit of the process that I use when I test these welders out, because you guys don't ever really get to see the process, but I told YesWelder from the beginning, if we're going to work together, then we're going to have to abide by the rules that I set when it comes to testing welders. And my process is I'll unbox the welder, make sure all the accessories are good, make sure that everything works like it should, plug it in quick, turn it on, make sure that we've got power and we've got all that stuff. And then I go ahead and I throw it on my welding cart, which you guys have seen, and we go from literally right out of the box to welding with this thing as much as we can for a minimum of 2 weeks. I use it in my daily routine. I put it through all of its paces. I use it for everything from exhaust to frames to everything else. And for 2 weeks straight, this welder gets hammered on. And if it survives that, then it gets a review. If it doesn't survive that, you guys will never see that welder on here, because I do not believe in even reviewing something that is a piece of garbage. It's a waste of my time and a waste of yours. So this welder I got quite a while ago, and probably about a month ago now, And truthfully, I've been using it for about a month, and it's been an absolutely incredible machine, and I didn't think it wouldn't be, because the original MIG205DS, which is now kind of hiding in a corner over here. So the original 205DS is hiding in that corner right there, and that thing gave me about a year of amazing service, and it's still going strong. I just chose to switch over to the MIG250 Pro. It's got a little bit more power, and we started doing some thicker frames and stuff like that. So that welder is still going strong, but it's taking a break. Okay, so now that you guys know a little bit of my process to actually test these things out, we're going to go through the new features on this 205DS. And if you're interested in the old 205DS, there is a video on the channel that I'll link somewhere so that you can see the review of the old 205 and then you can compare it to the new 205. So the 205DS-B has a few major changes. One of the things that I had been harping on YesWelder about every time that I spoke with them was basically that I needed a way to manually set my wire speed, my amperage, my voltage, and all of that stuff. Because most of these newer welders that are coming out now, they just have the synergic setting, which means that you set the amperage and the machine automatically sets the wire speed and the voltage. And sometimes that's great. You know, most cases and most scenarios, that is perfect and you can get away with that. However, with a lot of the stuff that we do here, we're constantly welding on rusted metal, thicker metal, thinner metal. It all depends. We're always doing something different. So it helps to be able to adjust all of those things indefinitely. So I can adjust voltage, I can adjust wire speed, I can adjust current, and we'll go through all those settings when we turn this machine on, but I want to kind of give you guys the differences. So the 205DS-B, you can now set everything manually. It's got a manual MIG mode right here. The MIG205DS original, you couldn't do that. You only had your synergic setup. Now this machine, just like every other one that we've tested recently, is a multi-process machine. And all that means, and I'll reiterate this again, I said it in a video prior, all that it means is that this unit is a power supply. This power supply has the capability to perform all sorts of different processes, whether it be MIG welding, TIG welding, stick welding, flux core welding, whatever it may be. However, the welder needs to have the options to set it up properly so that the power supply knows what it's doing. So this has a manual MIG, synergic MIG, stick, lift TIG, and it has an aluminum mode and a flux core mode. So again, multi-process machine. But the majority of people are going to use this as a dedicated MIG machine because truthfully, lift TIG is difficult unless you're doing structural stuff where the looks don't matter. Stick welding, unless you're doing large items like, you know, excavator buckets and stuff like that, stick welding is usually not going to come into play, at least with the people that watch my channel. So the multi-process machines are great because you do have a little bit of everything there, but, you know, you have a little bit of everything and you probably use a lot of one thing and not so much of all the others. So the second difference is obviously the fact that this welder can weld aluminum. Now, welding aluminum with a MIG welder, again, like I said in the beginning of the video, it's great, it's handy, it's good to have the ability to do that. However, you're not going to be creating the most beautiful welds you've ever seen in your life with a MIG welder and aluminum. It's just not going to happen. You don't have as much control over the puddle. You don't have nearly the type of heat control that you do when you're using a foot pedal on a TIG welder. So you have to be very careful when you're MIG welding aluminum. It's best for thicker material so that you have some leeway when it comes to heat input, but thin material can be done with it too. So this welder has that particular mode. It can weld aluminum. Now, where this welder is different than most of the MIG welders, most MIG welders actually require a spool gun. This happens to be the LBT-150, which is the spool gun from YesWelder, and we do have it hooked up to the 205DS-B. Now, this welder has a unique feature. Because it's spool gun compatible, there's a little switch inside here, right there, to switch between torch output and spool gun. Now, in the spool gun position, the spool gun, which is right here, will run. In the MIG position, it'll push the wire through the normal, you know, the MIG and out the end of the torch. Now, this MIG welder actually comes with your MIG torch, which most do, hopefully. And then, if you guys can see in here, there's this little round tube. And that's a liner for inside of this MIG torch. It's made from graphene and it's super slippery. And the reason that you have to switch to a graphene liner when you're welding aluminum is because aluminum material is very, very soft. So if you happen to put aluminum in your actual welder, like you load up a spool of aluminum in the welder and you're going to feed it down all of this length, and you happen to be in a position where you've got a pretty significant bend, then you're going to bind that wire up and it's going to bird nest inside the machine. Or it's going to bird nest and melt inside of the actual tube itself. There's just so many problems with it. So that's why the spool gun is nice to have, because a spool gun will allow you to only have to send wire that far. And it's a straight shot every time. It doesn't bend, it doesn't move, and you won't have the issue with bird nesting because the spool of wire is actually right here on the back of it. Hence why they call it a spool gun. So that's your best bet for MIG welding aluminum, is to use the spool gun. And don't even bother with having to change out the liner to the graphene liner and then try to put material through there, and you're going to end up with binding issues and bird nesting and everything else. And what it'll do is it'll actually get right up inside here and it'll just bird nest out. It's nasty. It's a pain in the butt to clear up. But this welder is capable of that. So you can put an aluminum spool in here, convert to the graphene liner, and do everything that you need to do when it comes to aluminum. I would just suggest using a spool gun. Okay, so now that we've gone over the major differences of this machine, let's go ahead and turn it on, and we'll go through some of the features. And I apologize if it's blinking. It's not blinking in real life, I promise you. The LED displays always do that. So I'm going to be reaching around the camera here. Hopefully I can get you guys in a little bit closer. And look, it's red and green. It's like Christmassy. So right now, we've got it set in synergic MIG. I don't know if you can see that because we're blinking, but I wonder if we set the frame rate different. Nah, I don't know. You guys will have to deal with it. So we're in synergic MIG mode. And again, none of this... Hold on a second. Let me try something. Alright, so let's see how 24 frames a second works. It's a little less blinky, but it's still blinky. My apologies. So, right now it's in synergic MIG mode, it's in aluminum mode, and we're at 0.35 thousandths wire. So now, what we could do to go through the settings, if we set this to manual MIG, which you probably can't see that, but that's manual MIG mode, when we adjust this button here, we're adjusting the wire speed. And you say it's a speed, and then we're adjusting the actual wire speed. So now we can adjust the wire speed all the way up to, I believe it's 15 centimeters per minute, maybe, somewhere around there, all the way down to 2.0. Now if we hit this button, we can adjust the voltage manually. So now we could set our voltage as high as we want. I believe it goes all the way to 30 volts. And then we could turn around and we could set our wire speed to whatever we want. So having that ability is amazing. Being able to set the voltage and the wire speed individually is great. Now when we go to synergic MIG mode, when we adjust the knob, we're adjusting the current. And that current adjustment, wherever we put it, this welder will automatically go ahead and set your wire speed and your voltage based on your current requirements. So you can see here at 148 amps, it's selected 16.5 volts. If we go up to the max 205, it'll probably be around 20 something. 19.5. So 19.5 volts, 205. So it's automatically setting our voltage and our wire speed. Now if we go to stick welding, we are going to be adjusting amperage in the stick welding mode, all the way up to 180 amps. And then it'll show you voltage. That's an initial voltage before you strike the arc. That'll fluctuate as you stick welding. And now you can see that our our volts and amps don't work because obviously you don't have a wire feed setting when you're stick welding. Same goes for lift TIG. Lift TIG, we can set our amperage, and it'll set a voltage based on our amperage, but that voltage doesn't really mean much of anything just yet until we actually start welding with it. So now let's go back to Synergic MIG, aluminum, 35 thousandths. We do have a wire feed button here that if we grab our gun and we hit the wire feed, it will actually feed wire. And it does that without utilizing the gas. Because while you're feeding wire to load the machine up, you don't want to be feeding gas through the machine because there's no reason to waste gas like that. So then we can go over here and we can change our wire size. 45 thousandths, 35 thousandths. That's on aluminum mode. If we go over to here, we can choose 100% carbon dioxide, 25-75 mix, flux core welding, and aluminum welding. And you can see every time we change to a different type of gas, our voltages change. And it automatically selects the proper voltage based on the gas that we're using. So the synergic setting is actually really amazing. And it works really, really well. But the one thing that I've noticed with these machines, and I'll bring you guys in on a little secret here, is I was having some issue with these machines. And I knew it was settings related. It wasn't machine or craftsmanship or workmanship related with the machine itself. But what seems to happen is when I'm welding just mild steel, I always put it on 100% carbon dioxide because for some reason it'll give me more voltage. And I always weld at 185 amps. And it'll give me about 22.6 volts. But if I go down to the CO2 argon mix, it drops to 21 volts. Now for the type of welding that I do, I need the extra voltage. So I'll always set it to 100% and then I get the extra voltage. So it's nice that you can select your materials. So we're going to go ahead and select aluminum because aluminum is what we are all going to be welding today. We're going to knock the current down again. I don't remember if I've ever said this, probably on some of my earlier TIG welding videos, but you always want to start out with your machine set at 1 amp per thousandths of material. The material we're going to be welding today is 125 thousandths aluminum plate. So we're going to start our machine at 125 amps on aluminum. We're using 035 wire. And we're going to see how that works out. And if that works out great, then we're going to leave the welder there and we're going to continue to weld with our current settings because they're working perfectly. So now that we got that sorted out of the way, we have some more menu options as well. If we hit this button here, we have an inductance setting, and I explained that before in a couple of my videos. But inductance basically will help you with various types of metal and various carbon contents to get a flatter bead or a taller bead or whatever you're looking for. But you don't really use much of the inductance settings unless you're really going for a very specific thing. You also have your step 2T and 4T. We've explained this before. We have your hot start function, and we have several other functions within the machine that are listed within the owner's manual to tell you exactly what they do. I'm not going to go over every single one of them because we'd be here all night. But this welder versus the 205DS, the DS-B, has a lot more features, especially, being able to set everything manually, which in my eyes is great because if you decide to start welding and you want to get deeper into welding and you want to know how things work and you want to set your own settings, this welder will do it, whereas the 205DS was a synergic machine only. You could not manually set your wire speeds and feeds and everything else. So, again, more settings. Alright, so that's the machine in a nutshell. Pretty similar to all the other YesWelder machines, just this one has a few extra features, and I can't tell you that I dislike it. It's an amazing machine. The 205DS has been absolutely incredible to me, and the 205DS-B I'm sure is going to be an absolute beast of a machine. And so now what we're going to do is we got a couple of plates set up over here. I'm going to bring you guys as close as I possibly can because aluminum is super messy to weld and I don't want to get the camera all yucky. So I'm going to position you guys, we're going to weld up some aluminum plate, and I'll show you how this machine did. Okay, so
Ah, you guys are super close.
So I went ahead and cleaned up these two pieces of aluminum. Again, this is 125 thousandths aluminum plate. We're going to utilize the spool gun, and we're going to weld these pieces together. See how it comes out. Got our machine set to 125 amps, and we are set to aluminum. We're on the synergic setting, and we're at 0.35 thousandths wire. So let's see how this goes. Alrighty, so let's take a look at that guy. Alright, so unfortunately you're not going to be winning any art shows with these beads. They don't look bad. I mean, this is probably going to be really hot, so I probably don't want to touch it. And I think we probably could have used a little bit more amperage too, because I think we're a little on the thin side. But like I said, I don't usually weld aluminum plate with anything but my TIG welder. So I mean, it's not terrible, relatively clean, and the machine did great. I think it's just me. I think we could have used a little bit more heat on that. And the reason I say that is because I don't know. We did kind of penetrate through to the other side, so I think we're doing all right. So not too shabby. All right, guys, so that's the YesWelder MIG205DS-B, and I keep sinking in this chair, so if you see me getting shorter and shorter, that's why. But this is the MIG205DS-B from YesWelder. Again, another great product from these guys, and they've been huge supporters of the channel for the last year or so, and I can't thank them enough for sending these things out here for me to test and for me to put in your guys' hands, because these things are incredible. And for the pricing is unreal. Again, when you guys go down to that link in the description down there, I put it down there so that you could click on it and you can save 20% site-wide on anything that YesWelder sells. They're constantly adding new products to the lineup. The 205DS-B just came out about a month ago. The MIG250 Pro came out a couple of months ago. We did a review on that one. The 205DS has been out for a while, but this new updated version, man, awesome. I mean, you guys saw those aluminum beads. They don't look too terrible for being MIG welded aluminum. They're nice and clean, they look good, and they're strong. So, can't go wrong there. Now, one of the things I didn't explain, and I'll explain this super, super quick. When you weld aluminum, you have to use 100% argon gas. Cannot use a CO2 mix. It will not weld. It'll weld, but it's not going to weld good. With straight argon, you're going to get that nice bead that you just saw. If you're using a CO2 mix, you're going to get all sorts of weird stuff happening, and your weld strength is going to suffer because of it. So make sure that you're using 100% argon. But aside from that, here's the rundown. Comes with all the YesWelder accessories that you would expect from YesWelder. The MIG gun. It comes with your ground clamp. Comes with the graphene insert for the MIG gun in case you want to try to run aluminum through it. Don't suggest it, but you can. The spool gun does come separately. It is sold separately, so you do have to buy that as well as this machine if you want to weld aluminum with it. But it is capable. So it'll do all that stuff, and it'll do it all well. Like I said, have been testing this thing for more than 2 weeks now. We've been using it on every job that we do, and it has not failed us one little bit. It works just as good as the previous MIG205DS, and it works amazingly well, like every other YesWelder product. So if you're thinking about picking one of these up and having the ability to weld aluminum, I highly suggest going to YesWelder's link in the bottom there, guys. I'm going to say it again. 20% off site-wide. Go get one of these things if you're interested in them. I'm not going to force you because that would just be wrong. But do that, and we'll see you on the next one. Hopefully it's not going to be another welder review because I know you guys probably get tired of those, but this one was kind of cool, so I thought I'd bring it to you. All right, go down there in the comments, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And we'll hopefully see you on the next one soon. Have a good night, everybody.